Hello everyone and welcome to the Climate Alarm Clock podcast, your weekly Irish climate news podcast. I'm Darragh Wynne and we are here, a team of volunteers bringing you the latest climate news every week. Normally we have a lovely mix of features, explainers, ideas of actions that you can take, but this week in the world of climate news there's only really one story. That is that the IPCC launched their latest report to tell us what we need to do to keep global warming limited to 1.5 or 2 degrees, as outlined in the Paris Agreement. And what they're saying is basically that we're running out of time. They're saying this is it. By the time the next report comes out, we'll already be too late. So this feels like a really, really important thing to talk about, a really, really important thing for us all to know about. So we're going to use this full episode to look in depth at the report. I'm delighted to be joined by Anna Pringle. Anna, how are you doing?
I am great, Darragh, thank you.
You survived the week of reading the report?
Yes, I've emerged. I won't say unscathed, but have survived.
And we're also delighted to be joined by Ciara Daly. Ciara, how are you keeping?
I'm good, Darragh. Thank you. Sounded like you couldn't remember me there. You're too consumed by the IPCC report, are you?
I've spent a lot of time reading it for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely in a lot better form than yourself and Anna, but we'll come back to me at the end of this, so we'll see how I am. I might have changed my tone then.
And we might have changed our tone as well, because definitely talking about these things and looking at the actions we can take is how we deal with this emotionally. So that's exactly what we're doing. So I know, Anna, you were sort of watching the press release on Monday, or the press conference. Do you want to talk a little bit about the background, Anna, and what happened on Monday?
Sure, Darragh. I thought we might actually start with just listening to a clip from Antonio Guterres, who is the Secretary General of the United Nations. And he made a guest speech on Monday at the press conference launching this latest IPCC report.
The jury has reached a verdict, and it is damning. This report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a litany of broken climate promises. It is a file of shame, cataloguing the empty pledges that put us firmly on track towards an unlivable world. We are on a fast track to climate disaster. Major cities underwater, unprecedented heat waves, terrifying storms, widespread water shortages, the extinction of 1 million species of plants and animals. And this is not fiction or exaggeration. It is what science tells us will result from our current energy policies. We are on a pathway to global warming of more than double the 1.5 degree limit agreed in Paris. Some government and business leaders are saying one thing but doing another. Simply put, they are lying. And the results will be catastrophic. This is a climate emergency. Climate scientists warn that we are already perilously close to tipping points that could lead to cascading and irreversible climate impacts. But high-emitting governments and corporations are not just turning a blind eye. They are adding fuel to the flames. They are choking our planet based on their vested interests and historic investments in fossil fuels, when cheaper, renewable solutions provide green jobs, energy security, and greater price stability.
So Ciara, how's the mood after listening to that?
I'm not sure. I mean, I have a thing where when I hear people talking about the climate, if their tone is a little bit kind of his tone there, I really had to push myself to listen. And when I really did, I heard what he's saying is basically we're in the red zone. We are in trouble. So I'm a little bit like, I don't know what I wouldn't say I'm like excruciating. I'm like not massively moved in any way. I'm just sort of thinking like, what? Why is he so relaxed in what he's saying? That's kind of what my feeling is, to be honest. I'm like, that's really serious what he's saying, but I don't feel like his tone is matching it. He could be reading me a menu in the restaurant from what he said.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, Ciara, because I think the people who have been paying attention, there's nothing new in the report. Like, we know, if you're paying attention, we know that we're in really bad trouble. So it's trying to remember.
I listened to that though, and I thought, wow, that is very hard-hitting language from the Secretary General of the United Nations. So it's interesting to hear your response to it, Ciara, because I think people in roles like his up to now have been much more diplomatic and haven't been as hard-hitting. So for the first time, and actually he did this with the last report as well, he came out very strongly. So it's interesting that that's not how you're responding to it.
Just to say, in my emotional response, and I don't know if you feel it, but when I hear somebody talking like that, as someone who's involved in climate action, I'm worried about it, I get a sense of relief from it.
Oh my God.
Because I'm like, I'm not mad.
Yeah.
Because you spend so much of this time thinking, the world is in so much trouble, and you look around and no one else is thinking it or feeling it. So you think, it must be me. And then you hear like this guy saying it's not an exaggeration. We're in line for an unlivable future. And my first reaction is always relief, because I'm like, okay, it is worth my while putting effort into this stuff. It is worth my while worrying about this stuff, because we are talking about the future of the planet and the future of humanity. And so there's some kind of reassurance that comes out of it. And then obviously it's the anger and the motivation and all the other feelings. So,
but also it's someone who's in a position of global influence, head of the United Nations, and you're kind of like, if he's saying this stuff, people have to listen. And I saw him described this week somewhere as the climate hero that we need. And based on Ciara's reaction, maybe not, but but at least he's saying the right things in a very forceful way. And he just called governments and big corporations liars. He just said they lied to us. I don't think
the words of what he said, I have a reaction to them, but I wouldn't have paid, honestly, I wouldn't have paid attention to this if I was not sitting in a podcast about climate change. That I would have been like, what is he on about? Like, I would have no distinction to him to any other politician, or anything like that. To me, it's just noise at the minute. But now that I listen to it, I'm like, why is he delivering that so calmly?
Yeah, I think actually, and I thought we'd talk about the media stuff later, but I think we might as well talk about the media reaction now, is that they talked about it on Monday or Tuesday, and they were like, okay, so we've got this report, and it's now or never. It's now or never. We need to take radical action. We need to rapidly change the way we live. Philip Boucher-Hayes of RTE said we need to change our economic model. And then it was like, just carrying on as normal. It's like, okay, now we're going to talk about the queues at Dublin Airport. And it's like, what? Guys, like we've just said, it's now or never. And now you're just talking about everyone going off on their holidays. Like, what? What are you doing? And that's part of the reason, there's a real disconnect with people hearing the information, but then just treating it like any other story, and it's not. It is the story. So Anna, do you want to sort of give maybe the context of where this report comes in the general climate sphere?
Sure. So the IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They are a collection of scientists from 195 countries, representing 195 countries around the world. About 200 scientists were involved in 278 authors from 65 countries were involved in putting this together, this particular part of it. What they do is they step back and they look at all of the research that's been done around the world into climate change. And these reports are basically an assessment and analysis of all the research that's been done since the last report, which was 6 to 8 years ago, 2014.
And who asked them to put this, is it governments? Is it the UN? Who's asking them to write these reports?
It's under the umbrella of the UN framework for climate change.
Okay.
And the scientists work on it voluntarily, but it is supported.
Okay.
It is signed off on by 195 governments.
Right. So if they're given their time voluntarily to this, it is obviously something they're concerned about.
Oh, absolutely. And you'll see scientists saying, we were up all night drafting the last bits and pieces of it. So, I mean, it's much easier to write something by yourself than it is to write something with 278 authors, So, so the three parts of it were the physical science report, which is basically the physics, what's happening on the planet. The second part was, and this is the one we talked about a month ago, was about adaptation. So that's what are we going to do, what changes are coming, and how are we going to adapt to them. And then the third part, this part, is the mitigation report. Okay. And what that is how are we going to stop this? How are we going to reduce emissions? And they look at different research and analysis on pathways on how to get there. So that's what this report is.
If this is so serious, why are they breaking it up into reports? Like, should this not have been done just all in one go, get it all out there so we have all of the information?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think you really hit on maybe a misunderstanding that people have on it. This report, they reviewed 18,000 scientific papers and looked at nearly 60,000 comments from different experts. So it's huge. The report itself is thousands of pages. So this isn't just like a few people in a room being like, okay, let's come up with ideas. This is them looking at all the information that is available to them. It takes years to put this together, and there's so much information. Like, climate change affects everything. So the best use of time and resources and everything was to divide it into these sections. And give a really, really comprehensive review. The other thing to say is that this isn't, this isn't something that they'll be doing again next month or next year. Okay. This is something that happens every 5 or 6 years. Right. There will be a summary of the 3 reports coming out in September. But then after that, it's kind of, we're not going to hear anything from the IPCC majorly for another few years. So that's why this report is so important, because there's not going to be another new report for years and years. Yep. And the report's telling us that we have 3 years for global emissions to peak, and then we need to see a rapid reduction. We need to see our emissions cut in half in 5 years if we're to have any chance of meeting our climate targets. So it's fairly important.
So it's sort of like these scientists have taken reports and studies that are already existing and just compiled them all together to present them to governments. Is that right? So that they know what actions to take. Yeah,
they do a review and analysis of the research that exists, that has been done. And they also use modelling to look at, in different scenarios, what would happen. And they factor all the research and all the analysis and modelling into that to come out with what their recommendations are and what their findings are. Okay. So it's a big, complicated process looking at, basically, it's kind of the, how do you put it? It's kind of like the Bible of where we are today in terms of what we know about climate change.
Okay.
And I suppose to say then, in terms of what you said about governments, it is for governments. You know, this should be a document that governments are using to influence their policy. So the report is thousands of pages long. Nobody has read it, really, the full report, except Philip Boucher-Hayes, who we interviewed last season. He read the whole thing. Fair play to him.
He did. I doubt that he read it all this week. It is not physically possible.
No, I'd say he did.
Well, I'm going to give that man some money, because you sent me a press release and it was not even 500 words and 40 minutes to get through. And I was like, never again.
So basically what they do then is they condense it down into what they call a technical summary, which is 145 pages. I did read that. And then there's a summary for policymakers, which is 65. I think this one was 65 pages.
I read that.
And that is there for governments. You would hope that governments and TDs and councils will be reading this and figuring out, using this as a roadmap. I suppose to give the context, the overall context is that these reports have been coming out for years and years, telling us we need to reduce emissions. And in the last 30 years, we have rapidly increased our emissions. So we have emitted more CO2 in the last decade than we did in any decade previously. In fact, the report tells us that 17% of all emissions in the last 170 years have come in the last 10 years. So we're getting these reports telling us, guys, we really need to reduce emissions. And as a global community, we are increasing emissions. I kind of think of it, the analogy I use is, imagine you're going to a gig somewhere, say you're going to a gig in the 3 Arena, and you need to book accommodation. And you look well in advance of the gig and you're like, oh yeah, there's a lot of accommodation. There's some cheap options there. There's some options that are connected with public transport. There's some expensive options. You don't bother. You wait a month you look at the accommodation again.
I know where this analogy is going.
There's fewer options. And then someone's like, oh, you really need to book your accommodation. You don't book your accommodation. Week before the gig, you look, the options aren't very good. They're all quite expensive. So you're like, no, something will come up. We'll wait. Day before the gig, you look, and like the only accommodation that is left is miles from the venue. Yeah. There's no public transport to get you there. It's really expensive. So it's going to cost you loads of money. It's going to be really inconvenient because you're going to have to like get a taxi there. If you want to see the gig. And in this metaphor, the gig is a livable future. So we've left it really late and there are no good options left. That's where that's where we are.
So we need more taxis.
So we need we need more taxis. No, we need to be aware that we have made some bad decisions in the past.
Well, Darragh, I would use the analogy of like the name of this podcast. It's the climate alarm, right? So if you think about an alarm clock and it goes off and you hit snooze, we've hit snooze and snooze and snooze, and now we are very, very late and we've got 5 minutes to get there.
That's basically what's been happening. You guys are saying that these reports have been, like, this is not just a new thing. These reports have been an ongoing thing, and they've been landing in the desks of TDs and ministers and whatever people in the government are called. And they are getting them, and either they're ignoring these warnings, they're ignoring the steps. That's what's been happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And to say as well that in 2015, all the countries of the world agreed to the Paris Agreement that we were going to try to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, or 2 degrees at most. And that was just an arbitrary number decided on at the time. Like, oh, that sounds pretty good. Then when the IPCC went off and calculated the actual impacts that was going to have, they realized, Jesus, 1.5 is very, very bad and 2 degrees is terrible. So, we really need to step up. We really need to step up and do this. This report is telling us that to have any chance of reaching 1.5 degrees, we need emissions to peak by 2025, and then we need to halve our emissions by the end of this decade. So that is massive, massive changes to our way of life, and it takes huge, huge change. It seems like 1.5 degrees is unavoidable. Best case scenario is that we go over 1.5 and manage to drag it back down by the end of the century. The trajectory we're on, we're headed for 3 degrees of warming, which is unthinkable. Like, think of if you were 3 degrees warmer than normal. Think of what kind of fever that would be. If instead of being 37 degrees, your body temperature was 40 degrees, you'd be at death's door. The planet's average temperature is 15 degrees, and we're going to pump 3 degrees extra heat into that. Even with all the pledges that we have made to this point, even if we meet them, we're still going for over 2 degrees of warming. So even if we meet all our targets as a global community, we're still way, way off. So we need massive, massive, massive societal change to turn this thing around.
Do we have anyone in Ireland that's trying to, like, not Ireland specifically, or Ireland as a whole, but in the Irish government who's actually taking this seriously? Are there any Irish, what Irish people are involved in this project to, like, bring it home and start screaming about it?
Okay, so who should be involved? Everyone. Like, everyone should be involved. This isn't saying like, oh, we need to do the climate plan here. This is telling us we need to transform our society. So I had a quick look to see what Mary Lou MacDonald, the leader of the opposition, next Taoiseach, is going to say on this. And we can listen to what she had to say about it now. Yeah, so that's what she's just said. That's what Mary Lou MacDonald said about the report.
Oh.
She said nothing. Leo Varadkar or Taoiseach, we can hear what he said now.
But should we be smiling at that?
And Micheál Martin or Taoiseach did talk about it, but it was kind of only... It was only as a justification for carbon tax and kind of to put down Sinn Féin in the Dáil when they asked about carbon tax.
Oh, that's encouraging.
So he didn't actually... he mentioned it, but he didn't actually say, you know, we're going to take this seriously and respond in the way that we need to.
Okay, so I kind of guess why you guys are a bit stressed out this week.
Well, I mean, but to your point though, we do have a climate action plan in Ireland. We do have a very good climate law in Ireland. And one of the things the IPCC report does say is that regulation, policy, laws do make a difference, and they do provide the framework for action. So we do have those frameworks for action. Now we just need to ramp up the actual action.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think now is a good time maybe to hear another clip talking about the actual action that we need to do and kind of where we are in the context of taking action. So here's Inger Anderson.
Climate change is here and now and causing huge disruptions in the natural world and to human well-being. This report tells us that we're still not doing enough to cut greenhouse gas emissions, confirming the findings of UNEP's 2021 emissions gap report. The last 2 decades saw the highest increase in emissions in human history, even though we know how much trouble we're in. The next decade cannot follow the same pattern if we are to hold warming this century to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Half measures will not halve greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, which is what we need to do. And we all need to go in on this. The IPCC tells us that we have the knowledge and the technology to get this done through a rapid shift from fossil fuels to renewable and alternative fuels, through moving from deforestation to restoration, through backing nature in our landscapes, oceans, and cities, through transforming our cities into green and clean spaces, and through behavior changes to address the demand side of the equation.
So first thoughts, I would say, at least she's showing a little bit more emotion. Who is that woman?
She is Inger Anderson, who is the head or the executive director of the United Nations Environment Programme.
Yeah.
So again, has a worldwide reach. And yeah,
I mean,
she was
she's saying sounds like some of it has positive connotations to it, like that there's like hope, or like that if we make these changes, we actually have a really nice kind of alternative ahead of us in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, Ciara, and I think that came across to me more in the second report, in the adaptation report, where it talks about changes to prepare for the impacts and how we can make our life better than that. One quote that in terms of making our lives better that I found amazing in the report was that the costs of reducing emissions would be paid back in the health benefits alone. Yeah. So by reducing emissions, the actual improvement in air quality would improve human health so much that all the money we used to transition will be made back in the health benefits alone. Not even talking about the actual climate impacts that we would avoid, which is amazing. So yeah, there's absolutely, in making these changes, we will make the world a better place if we make these changes. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a discussion or a description of cities, Darragh. I'm not sure if you came across that bit, but where they were talking about what you could do in cities in order to strengthen the reaction or whatever. And I read it and I thought, I want to live in this city, because it's like, it's putting more green spaces, it's more walking, it's more trees in the city, it's all of that, and it's how you build buildings, and it's all more human. And I thought, that would actually reduce air pollution, make everybody healthier, and be so much more pleasant as a place to live.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the problems Ireland faces, is that we have had next to no engagement in climate action for the last 30 years. Very little urban planning, very little long-term planning of any kind. So it makes the challenge much harder for us. But I suppose when we look at us in the global context, and that's one thing that came across to me from the report, is that, there are other countries where people still don't have a decent standard of living. And that's the quote that's used in the IPCC report. There are huge poverty, huge malnutrition. And actually, when we talk about the remaining carbon budget, like the emissions that we have left to use up and still avoid catastrophic warming, they're the people who should be getting the bulk of the emissions. So our emissions should have peaked ages ago in Ireland.
So what do you mean them our emissions? How do we give them our emissions? Are we not trying to cut emissions?
We are.
So if you think about it like a financial budget, imagine we've €1 million left to fix the planet.
Yeah.
In Ireland, we've spent loads of money in the past to make our standard of living better. Some countries haven't spent much money at all. So we should give them the money. So in terms of, there's a certain amount of carbon we can still use and have a safe-ish, livable future.
Yeah.
And so developing countries should get most of that.
Okay, I get you.
Yeah. So historically,
well, I mean, I would go further than that, because we in the global north have built our wealth through basically stealing from the global south through colonialism and extraction. So the wealth of the UK, the US, Europe is based on taking wealth from poor countries. So, you could argue actually that we should be paying reparations and we should be paying them back, not just letting them catch up.
The report kind of talks about that. It talks about global wealth. It talks about the need for developed countries to support developing countries. It talks about that. It talks about how inequality makes climate change worse, how it makes the solutions more inaccessible. So all this inequality that we're seeing, all this injustice that we're seeing, is a huge part of the problem that this report is actually saying, right, we need to fix this too if we're going to fix the climate stuff.
So how do we fix it?
Yeah.
That is the big question, Ciara, and that's what the whole report is dedicated to. And it looks at every area. It looks at energy, it looks at transport, it looks at housing, it looks at food, it looks at land use, looks at agriculture. We don't have time to get into all of that today, so we'll be looking at different little snippets of the IPCC report for the rest of this series of the Climate Alarm Clock. But I think for the rest of it, we'll talk about two things. We'll talk a little bit at the end, maybe about getting politically active. But now I think it could be a good idea to talk about a new section in this report that didn't appear in previous reports, and that relates a lot to the developed world, looking at the demand side, looking at demand. So Anna, do you want to discuss that?
Yeah, I mean, it has. So, and this is the first time it's done this. And it says that actually, if all the demand side strategies were done, it could reduce emissions 40 to 70% by 2050. And they have a high confidence that that's the potential of demand side strategies. And Ciara, I'm guessing you're about to say, what the hell is a demand side strategy? And it's a very good question.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was actually going to say, what is demand?
Well, what demand is, so it's like demand is how much energy do I need? How much electricity do I need to use? How much fuel do I need to use? And we've been having some debates about this in Ireland in the last few weeks. And I would say fairly infantile debates a lot of the time, where, if the whole thing about if you travel at 100 kilometers an hour instead of at 120 kilometers an hour, you will use a lot less fuel in your car.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear that though. But that's demand side. That means you're demanding less petrol to get from Dublin to Galway or whatever.
Okay, so like our consumption basically.
Yeah, basically. So the report for the first time is saying explicitly that sociocultural and lifestyle changes can accelerate mitigation, can reduce emissions. And they're talking about things like flying, for example. We know we shouldn't be doing it. And they have a lovely acronym. They're great for acronyms, but this one is avoid, shift, improve. So if you can avoid using emissions, you can avoid generating them. So for example, avoid long haul aviation. You can shift from different things. So for example, shift from eating meat to eating a plant-based diet. And you can improve, and the greatest improved potential comes from within the building sector. So you can use energy efficient building materials and processes. So I kind of like that avoid, shift, improve. I think if you think about that even in your own life, you can think about ways that you could implement that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think, I think where the report was strong was it was talking about how we need everybody and we need things to change, and people are kind of waiting for someone else to lead the change, you know. In developed countries, we have no excuse. You know, we have a decent standard of living. We're in such a strong position to actually do stuff. So, I mean, we've talked about politicians and their reactions, and are they going to read it? Like, no, probably not. Are they going to listen to this podcast? Probably not. So I take the report personally and I say, well, okay, I read it. What can I do? And this report actually tells us the stuff we can do. So one of the big things is transport.
Yep.
Trying to be car free if possible. That's really difficult in Ireland.
Yeah.
Maybe you can do it. Maybe you can't. What I would say is if you can't do it now, say, well, this is something I need to be doing long term. So what do I need to do so that I can be car free in 5 years or 10 years?
But it's also not an individual responsibility, or it's partly, but not entirely an individual responsibility, because we need to have regulation and we need to have... Go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. Just if I can, just in terms of the other things it says we could do, moving to a plant-based diet, that's there, and that's something you can do now. We know we need to eat less meat. So that's something you can do right now. Yes.
I actually read this, so I came across this report not because I'm cool and like really intelligent studying. I work with food and drink businesses, and one of these clients actually sent me a report, so I had to read it. Unlike the government, I'm following through with my work, I suppose. But one of the facts in it was about the difference that swapping from a meat-based diet to plant-based can make just here in Ireland. So let me grab it 1 second. It was that, so if each person in Ireland opted for a plant-based diet 1 day a week, just 1 day a week, the reduction in emissions would equate to removing all of the cars in Dublin for over 2.5 months.
Wow.
And so on Friday,
Wow.
I just gave up meat. I was like, "Feck this. That's an easy win for me."
Yeah.
And so, Ciara, that's a great example of demand side energy use or lack of. And actually, one of the phrases that jumped out at me in the summary for policymakers was choice architecture. Does anybody know what that is?
No.
Well, I didn't either. I was like, choice architecture. But what it is, it's basically how choices are presented to consumers. So if you think about the amount of culture shift, so the chapter on demand is all about socio-cultural issues and how culture has to change. People have to make different choices. But the choice architecture describes how choices are presented to consumers and how that then changes how people make decisions. So when that choice is presented to you as, if you give up meat for 1 day a week, this is the equivalent of that, you're like, oh, okay. But if the choice is presented to you as, look at the lovely black and white cows gambling around the lovely green fields, and they're the healthiest cows in the world, and aren't we great, and have a steak.
Yeah.
It's a different way of presenting that choice.
Yeah.
And I suppose when I think of that choice thing, if you think of the choice, okay, I can choose to support this industry that's polluting the thing, or I can choose to find the Irish producers who are producing vegetables, who are producing food in a sustainable way, and I can support them, and that helps that industry to grow. And we need to see, not so much in this report, but in the last report, we need to see massive changes in our land usage. This report talks about how much more forest cover we need globally, which if we take cattle off the land, we can do. We can restore ecosystems to help us be prepared for the impacts and help ourselves with food security, because if we hit 3 degrees of global warming, places where we import food from, we're not going to get any more. So do you know what? We should start growing our own food. And whatever it takes, whatever we need to pay people, whatever we need to do to reskill people, whatever we need to do to get people on board, we need to do it. Like, we really, really, really need to do it.
But Darragh, we're already seeing that. One of the things I heard this week was one of the talk programs on radio talked to some vegetable growers, or maybe it was prime time. Anyway, they talked to vegetable growers, and because apparently in some places in Ireland there's already a shortage of vegetables like tomatoes. Is it a fruit or a vegetable? Whichever. Anyway, there's a shortage. But this is because the cost of powering glass houses, greenhouses, has gone so high, it's not economically viable for growers to grow
Wow.
tomatoes here anymore. So we're already seeing the impact of this.
And then what compounded that is that there was really bad weather in Spain, where we get lots of our food from, so their crop has been affected. So we're already seeing climate change
Yep.
affecting our food. I think one quote that really, felt like it empowered me in terms of, taking action or whatever, or how you can make a difference is said, actors, that's everybody, government, civic society, individuals, businesses, actors either contribute to the status quo of a global high carbon consumption and GDP growth oriented economy, or help generate the desired change to a low carbon energy services, well-being and equity oriented economy. So the choices you make, you either decide, right, I'm going to go along with the status quo, or else you put your hand up and you stand up and say, no, this isn't working. This is going to wreck our future. I am going to make the choices that I can make in the here and now.
Yep.
Um,
And
So-
the report
And I think
also
that's-
says that collective action underpins system change. So they're actually calling for people to take action and to get involved, and so organising and collective action works, which I thought was very
So what
radical
kind of
to see.
collective actions can people get involved with? Because I think people do. Like, I know you mentioned earlier that like people are waiting around for other people to take action, but I don't think that's true. I think they actually are just missing that key part of like, well, what's the government doing to help us? So what, it's hard. Like I said there, I'm going to give up meat. I love meat. So I don't know how true that's going to stay for the next few months. But if I have something that's motivating me, if there's a system put in place, okay, bad example with meat, energy wise, I'd love to get rid of my car. If I had something to motivate me to actually get rid of it and it not affect my day-to-day life in terms of like, am I able to see friends? Am I still able to see family? Am I able to get places that I'm not isolated? Then I'm more likely to make that change. But if it's not happening, how do I call for that to be provided for me by the people who are supposed to be doing that for me?
yeah, getting politically active is absolutely the thing to do.
Have you got an
So
easier way
find
for me?
Well,
No.
but it's not easy,
No.
Ciara.
So you
I'm
said
going to pull up the socks, though.
things that are important aren't always easy.
Yeah, and you said something along the lines of like, without it affecting your life. It is going to affect your
Yeah.
life.
It already
Climate
is.
change is going to affect your life massively. So are you going to let it affect it now on terms you can control? Or are you just going to wait and sit there and let things unfold in a disastrous way in 10 years in the future? Or 20 years in the future. That is the choice. That's the choice all of us have.
Are we going to hit snooze
And,
again?
Like genuinely, I think about this sometimes. I'm a music teacher and I love teaching music. And I watched the media this week do nothing on this report. And I was so angry because they're not doing their jobs. No one's doing their jobs. Like it's not too much to expect a livable future. Like a planet where the standard of living is as good or better than it is now. And that's not what we're on course for. We're way, way off.
So when you say get
So-
politically active, like what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
So first of all, and we'll do up a little template that we'll share, email your TDs and just ask them, what's your reaction to this report? How is this going to influence your policy going forward? That's one thing. Start there. But maintain contact with your TDs.
And your
Find
county
groups that
councillors.
and your county councillors. That's one thing this report was huge on, actually, was the importance of local governance. How much they have to do, and hold them to account. Okay, it's disgraceful that our leaders haven't read this report or commented on it. It's absolutely disgraceful. So tell them that, and tell other
So
people
how
that.
do we
Yeah.
how do we show our anger at that? Do we send them an email? Like, is that something we do?
Yeah, start off by sending an email, and we'll do a little template up that we'll share on our socials that people can copy and send off. Start off by sending an email, then find other groups. Find like the groups that we're going to be talking about on the podcast, that lobby politicians, that are engaged in civic society, that are trying to make change. Join those groups, get active in those groups.
And talk about it. Talk to your family and friends and family.
When it comes to making big long-term decisions in your life, that's where you really need to think about climate change. So the next car you buy, or if you're buying a house, or those kind of things, that's when you really need to make the decision. So just commit to considering climate change in your life more. and trying to hold people to account who aren't doing their job, because we are failing, as Antonio Guterres said, we're failing massively. Like, we're way off course. So yeah, trying to hold our politicians to account. Is where we go with it.
One of the big themes from this report was saying it's now or never, and I actually don't like that phrase, because I think we might go, oh shit, well, we can't do it now, so let's leave it till never then. Because it's not now or never. Action has to happen, even if, so setting a target, like saying it's now or never, this has to happen by 2025, that allows us to fail. We can't fail here. Any action is better than none.
And I think when you see another problem that's a barrier, like the housing crisis, we can't tackle climate change because we have a housing crisis. No, the housing crisis is part of the problem, and we need to tackle climate change while tackling the housing crisis. Oh, we can't take climate action because of the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is part of the problem. It's Putin's income is coming from fossil fuels, so let's tackle both of them at the same time. So that's one thing, is don't look at other problems as a barrier to climate action. Look at them as an additional challenge, because that's what they are.
Yeah.
All these things are connected, and we need to tackle them all, but we cannot neglect climate change, because it is literally our future that's at stake.
I mean, one of the other takeaways from the report is no new infrastructure should be built for fossil fuels. So what does that mean? That means if you hear that we are building gas plants because we need them in the interim, you need to be asking your TDs and county councillors, and why are we doing that? If you hear we're bringing in LNG to Shannon, we need to stop that and not let it happen. So that's where we need to be protesting and, raising questions, because everything we do has an impact.
Yeah, I think maybe then to finish off, could we hear a little bit more from Antonio Guterres on that?
Oh, get ready to get moved.
Leaders must lead, but all of us can do our part. We owe a debt to young people, civil society, and indigenous communities for sounding the alarm and holding leaders accountable. We need to build on their work to create a grassroots movement that cannot be ignored. If you live in a big city, a rural area, or a small island state, if you invest in the stock market, if you care about justice and our children's future, I am appealing directly to you. Demand that renewable energy is introduced now at speed and at scale. Demand an end to coal-fired power. Demand an end to all fossil fuel subsidies.
That was actually a little bit more encouraging, or not encouraging, but a little bit more moving. But maybe it's because I have more context.
Yeah. I think Inger Anderson's call to action as well is another good one to listen to.
Increased action must begin this year, not next year, this month, not next month, and indeed today, not tomorrow. Otherwise, we will, as the UN Secretary General put it, continue to sleepwalk into a climate catastrophe.
So I think a couple of key takeaways from this. One is the challenge is enormous and we do have to act now. The good news is, though, that the cost of renewable energy is coming down. We know we can do it. The good news is that this report shows that individuals can demand action and can get together and work together to make change happen. So the good news is there's a lot of positive things happening. They just need to happen faster, and we all need to be doing our bit to make them happen faster.
That's really encouraging, and I'm very glad to hear you say that, for one. Thank you, Anna.
Ciara, how's your mood now?
It's actually okay. I mean, I thought I was going to be really in a ball at the end of this. I'm definitely a bit more motivated to take some actions that I've been kind of putting off. And I always talk about I'm going to talk to councils, I'm going to email, and I don't. Admittedly, I don't. So today I'm going to bloody send an email, if not 3. That's my mood. I definitely need to learn more about this, is what I've learned today.
Great. And I suppose that's what we're here to do. You know, at the Climate Alarm Clock, we're here because people can't easily get the information they need about this crisis. So we're here every week with the latest climate news, information of actions that you can take, information about what we need to change, how we can do it. So if you did get something out of this episode, please make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Climate Alarm Clock, and on Twitter at The Climate Alarm. Wherever you listen to your podcasts, do please subscribe and give us a review. And if this information is new to you and you feel it's important, please do share this podcast, this episode, with a friend, and let's get going on taking the action we need to take. So next week we'll be back with our normal episodes where we have a mix of features. We'll be rounding up the news, telling you about climate events that are happening during the week, hearing from a range of people and finding out some actions you can take. So until next week, goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
See you next week.
For more good news.